This is a Crowd podcast.
Honor is more important than just about anything. It really is. And honor is a gift that a man can only give himself. Am I perfect? Hell no. Have I lied? Yeah. Have I cheated? Yeah. Have I been a bad person at times? Yeah, I have. I'm human. I am not perfect, nor will I ever be perfect. However, I do my best to be a better man every day. The only pride I have is knowing that when I walk away from today, this day, this moment right now, I will have left the world a better place than it was yesterday.
In this episode, Casey has another run-in with the cops. But this time, it's after he has asked for their help. Just as I felt I was beginning to work him out.
Law and order is the basis of our society. Without law and order, you have nothing. You have nothing.
This is a man who, on the one hand, believes passionately in the American Constitution, but at the same time has no problem taking the law into his own hands.
That is law and order. I'm a lot harder than the justice system would be. A lot harder.
And as well as wanting to send a message to all the bad guys out there that Casey and his team will, quote, make them stand before God, there's another reason which I haven't told you about yet on why he wanted to do this podcast.
I think it'll also start helping a lot of people, instead of watching somebody be beaten almost to death, step up and realize if there's 100 of you and only one of a really bad person, and you step up, then you're going to stop a lot of problems.
Clearly, Casey likes to enforce law and order himself. In fact, he wants other civilians to do the same. But in the story he's got for us in this episode, he simply cannot complete his mission without help from the police.
They come back and they're like, that's not a valid warrant. You need to break off immediately. Otherwise, you're going to be arrested. And I said, you know what? Fuck you.
In a moment, you'll also hear me discover yet another side to Casey. And believe me, once you get to the end of this episode, you'll have a picture of him in your mind, which you might struggle to shake off. I'm Sam Walker, and this is American Vigilante, Episode 7, A Well-Earned Meal. Hello, stranger.
Well, howdy, Sam. It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has been a while since we spoke.
I would be lying if I'd said I hadn't thought about you and wondered how you've been doing.
I've been good. I've been on a couple of little road trips. Enough of me. What have you been doing?
Not sleeping, working, just trying to get caught up on life, you know. I'm going to be a little bit punchy today. I am. I've got about 2 hours sleep last night, so I'm not quite at 100%, I don't think.
Yeah, when are you up? I bet you're up at sort of 3:30 building some sort of cabin, aren't you? With your bare hands.
Well, if I get my choice to sleep, I usually wake up around between 4:30 and 5:30 in the morning. Usually a little earlier, like toward 4:30. Sometimes, though, I do have just a total which doesn't happen often, but I'll sleep till, 6 or 7. Right,
so your wild lie-in is when most people generally start their day if they're working in an office or having to get up and commute or anything like that. That's your lie-in, 6 o'clock.
Well, considering I usually go to bed between midnight and 1 also, yeah, you're right.
So hang on, you have 3 to 4 hours sleep a night?
Usually 4 to 5. And it's usually broken. I usually wake up during that time too and prowl around the house and things like that. That's regular.
Have you always been like that since you were a kid?
Mm-hmm.
This might sound like a really silly question, but do you sleep in a bed?
Yeah. In fact, I just got a new bed. It's so nice. I like lay down on that thing and it's like, oh God, I'm sleeping on a cloud. And I hate those Tempur-Pedic mattresses. They're just too hot and you can't move in them. You try to get out of them after you've been sleeping on them. It's like you're stuck in this glued out, cut out form,
I'm imagining you have a big bed.
Yeah, I use a king-size bed. This new one I got's a queen mattress, but I got a killer deal on it and it's brand new, so I couldn't pass it up. But I fill it up pretty good.
Are you a one-pillow man, a two-pillow man?
One. And you wouldn't even call it a pillow. I don't have a lot of a neck, so my pillow literally is like it's like 2 inches thick, maybe. I mean, I can literally lay down on my side and sleep on with my head on my shoulder.
So that's how you sleep. How do you relax? What's your hobby?
You're gonna laugh. I love to read, right? But that's not how I relax. And I love to hike and to be in the mountains and to be outside, but that's not how I relax. My way to relax is that I actually just sit or I stand outside and do nothing. I'll sit and watch a herd of cattle graze for 2 hours. I can go up and there can be, a herd of elk or a bunch of deer where I shoot, and they'll be laying down. They actually bed down on my land. I mean, I'm a hunter. I hunt my meat. I do hunt my deer and elk and bear and cat, whatever. I eat everything I hunt. I milk animals for my milk. I make cheese. Grow a garden, can my food. I've got chickens. I love my fresh eggs. I eat about 8 eggs for breakfast every morning, along with whatever, sausage patty, bacon. So I'm pretty self-sustaining. And the animals that are on my land, I can actually shoot my guns and they don't even run. Because I don't hunt my land.
So why? Why don't you hunt on your own land?
Well, there's 2 reasons. One, I like to relax, and that's what I do. I like to just be able to sit and enjoy it. And the other reason is if I'm ever injured or hurt and I need meat, it's close by.
So how close do you live to what we would consider civilization? Where's your closest neighbor? How far away are they?
Well, my closest neighbor's about 3 miles away.
Why the isolation?
Well, when I come home, I like to be able to take my guns off. I mean, I've always got one on me. I really do. But I've got animals that are really good caretakers of my land. And those animals ensure that I'm well aware of anything before it arrives at my house. And I mean, there's nothing that gets by them.
So you've got pets?
Yeah. Got dogs, cats, just normal pets. They're just highly protective of me.
And who do you live with?
I live alone.
Always?
No, I was married. And we just had some differences and we split up.
And I know you're a dad, you're a father, but your children don't live with you. Have they all left home?
Yeah, they're all pretty much grown and out of the house. They're not really at home anymore. So
you strike me as someone who's got a huge connection with the natural world. So what does it feel like when you're standing in nature like that and connecting with other living beings?
Your toes are in the grass and in the dirt, and you can hear the fish rolling in the water. I mean, when they come up the top and they don't quite jump out. And you'll notice that there's different type of birds. And, there's certain birds that'll be in the area and then, all of a sudden they'll start screeching and they'll fly away real fast. And you look up and there's a hawk. I'm feeling the breeze on my face and which direction it's blowing from. And I'm smelling a certain sense of what's down, I don't think about anything else. It's like human beings. There's just a big circle. And everything has its place and everything has its thing. And by paying attention to nature, it lets my brain unwind. I've been told I've got a nose like a dog, which actually is very true. I've actually found people before because of their scent. I told you once that I went through a police academy. And even though I was never a cop, I went clear through the academy. And they've got a couple scenarios that you're not supposed to pass on purpose. And one of the scenarios, you have to go in with a partner and clear a room, and there's weapons and there's people. And one of the people is hiding in a way that you can't find him. You absolutely cannot find him. And when you're done with this scenario, you're supposed to call out King's X. You say King's X, that means that the scenario is done. You've given up. You're finished. My partner's like, we got a King's X. He goes, we're done. I'm like, no, we're not. I mean, we're pushing up roof panels with our weapons, and we're looking at all these places, and for the life of me, I get it narrowed down to an area that's about 20 feet. It's in between these desks and this wall, and I'm like, he's right here somewhere. And the corporal and the sergeant come in and watched us search it twice more. He goes, we're kind of done for the day. You guys have been in here more than an hour. And I'm like, I'm telling you, there's a guy in here. And he goes, why do you say that? And I'm like, I smell him. And he started laughing. And he yells out, King's X. He goes, you need to get up. Well, this little asshole folded himself up into this box you wouldn't think a man could fit in. Well, they had to help him out of this box because he'd been in there so long he was jacked up. I honestly believe that the no-win scenario does not exist. There's no such thing. As long as you are persistent and methodical, you will always prevail.
How important is winning to you?
Winning is more important to me than my own life. I like to win so much that I try to prepare for everything that comes against me. And I ain't always the best prepared, but I do my best to be the best prepared. Because if I fail, then somebody else doesn't get a chance to do what they want to do. If I fail, they don't get peace of mind again.
Imagine if you had joined the police force. Imagine what an asset you could have been.
I'd be in prison. I would. They'd have put me in prison. There's no way that I could peel some scumbag off of some woman or child or some old person that they just completely wronged and put them in cuffs and put them in the back of my car without adjusting them permanently and taking them in and processed paperwork on them before my paperwork was done, had them out of jail on bail, hurting somebody else. I just couldn't have done it. I have so much respect for so many police officers that can do those kind of things. I really do.
Is it respect, though?
Yeah.
Or are you angry at them? Are you angry at them for doing that?
No. They do their job. Don't mistake what I'm saying. There are many police that I'm extremely angry at. But there are so many cops out there that are so good. And they do so much good. And to be able to rein themselves in when their moral code is telling them to, and I know this because I've talked to some of them, they want to kill somebody. They want to beat the hell out of them because they've just come in and seen what they've been doing to some child or some woman or some old person, and they can't do it. They have to abide by the law because their job is to arrest and detain. And I have a lot of respect for cops that do their job. I couldn't do it. I couldn't.
Casey doesn't stop there. There's another reason why he wouldn't join the police.
I'm going to tell you something, Sam. I've got a friend of mine, United States Marine, served his country honorably and was killed in his home by a fucking SWAT team with a no-knock warrant because they hit the wrong fucking house. That man served several tours in the sandbox and came home through all that fucking blood and death and bullshit, and the cops went into his house, and it was the wrong house. They went into the wrong house. And then they searched the house trying to find evidence that he was a bad person, and they found nothing. That man had just come home off of a 12-hour shift working for his wife and new child. Still came out of his bed with his .45 in his hand. I wonder how many of those cops he could have killed, but you know what he noticed? He noticed out the window the flashing lights and knew they were cops. So he lowered his weapon, and they shot him in his own home. And then they all got to hide behind their badges because of that cool little, what the hell's that thing they call it? Qualified immunity. That's it. Now, I don't give two fucking shits if you're a cop or a guy like me or anything. That kid now has no dad. That woman has no husband. That man was a United States Marine. That's bullshit, Sam. And no, I never went after any of those cops, nor will I. They were doing their job, and it was wrong.
How hard was it for you not to go and serve justice on those people?
Oh, my first instinct was to go bury every one of those motherfuckers, let me tell you. The hounds of hell were within my heart. And I had to sit there and tell myself, you need to sit down for a couple days and relax and think this through. But I know for a fact that this man was a friend of mine, and he was innocent, and he was a good man. And that's pure bullshit. And those officers never got punished. None of that chain of command. They're all still in don't even get me fucking started. I refuse to talk about this anymore.
We're going to take a little break here. And when we return, KC has got a story for us in which, even by his own standards, something quite odd happens. He calls for help. From the police. Twice. Back in a moment. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Check them out at betterhelp.com/AV. It's affordable, it's modern, it's not a crisis line, it's not self-help. It is professional counselling which you can do securely from home. Here's how it works. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You just fill out an easy questionnaire and it takes about 5 minutes. They have counsellors who specialise in stress, anxiety, relationships, sleep, self-esteem, anger and so much more. You can even change your counsellor for free if you want to. They make it really easy to do that. It's really convenient, it's safe, it's private, and it's all done online, so you can do it by video, phone, or live chat. And you can send a message to your counsellor at any time. You can start living a happier life today. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor at betterhelp.com/AV. Join over 1 million people who've taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/AV.
You've watched them in unforgettable adventures, love affairs, and tragedies. Now it's time to hear their own remarkable stories. From the makers of Death of a Rock Star and Death of a Sports Star, this is Death of a Film Star.
And action.
Starring Heath Ledger, Marilyn Monroe, Chadwick Boseman, Robin Williams, Carrie Fisher, and Bruce Lee. Search for Death of a Film Star in your podcast app. You've seen them tell stories. Now it's time to tell theirs.
Hello. Hello there. What voice do you want me to do? We'll do a little bit. I'll just do my voice.
Do your voice.
Yeah, thanks. Hello, I'm Joe Marler. People think I hate people, but I don't. I actually love interaction with people. I love finding out what jobs they do and whether I could do what they do. The Joe Marler Show.
Joe Marler Show.
With new episodes every Wednesday.
Since the start of American Vigilante, we've met plenty of characters who are part of Casey's team. People who go on these missions with him. And we know that his vehicles have names too. Hammer and War Wagon. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to meet another.
Alice is a 70s Chevy four-wheel drive pickup. It's got a lift kit, 35-inch tires. The engine's been tuned to the point that it runs actually on airplane fuel. It can run on streetable fuel, but you've got to dilute it 50-50 with airplane fuel. And then I have 2 tanks. One is straight airplane fuel, and that's to feed the engine. It puts 475 horsepower on the ground at the back tires, which is an incredible amount of power. So once you punch Alice up and decide to go into pursuit or high speed, you have to switch it over onto the pure airplane fuel, and it only gets about 4 miles to the gallon. It's crazy fast. It's got big ramming bumpers front and rear, and it's also got a special toolbox system in the back that you can actually secure prisoners to.
So that's Alice, a vehicle. And we've got 2 more human team members to meet too. Cody and Pookie.
They're 2 different guys that have been on the team for a while. Both fathers, both work normal jobs. Cody is, he's literally fearless, and he's smart. His brain works so quickly. sharp in so many ways.
How'd you meet him?
He married somebody that I knew. Actually, he married the daughter of somebody that I knew. And then Pookie, known him for quite a while. Salt of the earth kind of guy. Give you the shirt off his back. He can fix anything, and I mean anything. You give that guy a safety pin, a rubber band, and some bubble gum, and I swear to God, he can make anything work, no matter what it is. Just great guys. And on this story, I was actually running with Cody. This took place in one of the biggest cities in the United States. And around big cities, of course, there's lots of little cities. You know, they just suburbs that have branched out. I got contacted by a friend that knew this family. And they're an Asian family. Real quiet people, really hardworking. I'm not kidding you. The father had died, I do believe, like 10 years before. Mother had 7 or 8 children. Very loving mother. I mean, this woman worked her little butt off. I mean, she probably weighed 100 pounds, but she took care of all of her kids. So I met and went with her, and she didn't cry at all, but she was really sad. She's like, I can't believe my son's doing this to me. You know, I've still got 3 kids at home, and we're going to be homeless. I probably shouldn't have bailed him out. He was involved with one of the Asian gangs. Deeply involved. He'd been with them for years. And this boy was 24 years old, I do believe. Well, she'd put her house up as collateral. His bail was $500,000. So, if you remember me explaining to you about that, that means she had to pay $50,000 in cash, and then she had to put up collateral for $500,000. She'd put up the title to her minivan, title to her car, and her house, and given him all of her jewelry. I mean, she gave him everything to get her son out of jail, and he'd skip bail. And it was 3 or 4 weeks before it went into forfeiture. If she didn't have him back, if he wasn't returned to the courts within that month, then she was going to lose her house. The police had been after him, I think, for, I don't remember, 2 months, and nobody could get their hands on him. What happens in a situation like this is I have to go get authorization to arrest him. I mean, I could do a citizen's arrest, but if I'm going to do this, I need to get paid. And she has no money. So really, I would have done it for free, but I knew that there was already collateral up and that there was money that could be made. So I went to the bail bonds company, and I negotiated terms. So I called up Cody, and I'm like, hey, dude, we got a job. I need you in this city, and I need you here ASAP.
How do you know, Casey, which of your team members are going to be the right fit for a job?
They're all fit. It's just he was the closest one. I mean, if I had to go creeping out in the woods, there's certain guys that I would rather have with me, but whenever it's something like this, every one of them would fit. We're going to be working in an urban environment, obviously. Weapons, bad guys, guns, bullets, surveillance. So right then it's carte blanche. So Cody's like, no problem. He saddled his ass up and met him that night, and we went and picked up Alice. And Cody and I started searching. The one thing I had going for me is, you know, this was an Asian gang, and they were known to drive certain cars. And the only distinctive thing he had was he had a very large tattoo covering his entire back that was incredibly distinguishing, like no 2 people would have this. But, you know, these guys all wear shirts all the time, right? And he was carrying those Tech 9. They're like a little machine gun, but they're semi-automatic that carry a 30-round magazine. But he'd convert them to full auto, and he had 2 of them. So he was known to spray 9mm bullets whenever he got into a tight fix. Plus, he was hanging around that same gang, which, you know, they all carry these same weapons. So it's a very volatile situation. So Cody and I searched an area, I kid you not, it was probably a 70 square mile area. We were going to addresses all over, setting up surveillance, and I mean striking out time after time after time. We'd been on it a good 2.5 weeks, and nothing. Cody has this ability to be a big city boy if he wants to. I mean, he puts on what he calls his bling, boy. He's got fancy rings on his fingers and jewelry chains around his neck and pretty little diamond earrings. He's got this cute little giggle and this laugh, and he can just talk to anybody. And he can throw every gang sign known to man. I mean, he's got them all down, let me tell you. We had called in a favor off one of our old clients, and he'd borrowed a very racy Honda, bright red, loud pipe, fast little thing, and he was blending pretty well. So Cody's in there, and he finally, after 3 days of hanging around with these people, was able to develop a very, very small lead that our guy was dating a girl, and she drove a certain car. We ended up getting the plate ran, got an address, and she lived in a certain area. So you rewind and you back this up. You can find out who they're screwing or where they're sleeping, and you got them, right? And that's when we started setting up surveillance on that house. And for days we saw nothing. Probably 3-4 days we saw nothing. And one day, this like a 90s Buick pulled up, and it didn't fit. This was a Buick, and out steps this guy, and he goes into this house. And Cody's got the spotting scope, and he's full on face, everything, and Cody's like, I think that's him. And I'm like, is that him, or do you think that's him? He goes, I think that's him. And I'm like, well, that's not going to cut it. Dude, if we go there right now, and this ain't him, and I said, we're going to blow this location. And we sat there until late that night. Guy never come out. And I told Cody, I was like, look, we're getting tired. We need to get some sleep. We're going to get out of this truck. So we come back the next morning, that car was still there. So we're sitting there, and it's hot. It is so hot that day. I mean, I remember it was sweltering. And we're sitting there, and this guy comes walking out. Girl was still in there, never came out. The guy got in the car, and he left. Later toward the evening, probably 5-6 o'clock, it was still lots of daylight. It was light till 9:30, 10 o'clock at that time. I think it was August. And that same Buick comes back. Same guy steps out of it, and he's wearing a tank top. And on the sides of his arms and the loop on the back under his neck, you can see part of a tattoo. And Cody's like, KC goes, I can't make out the tattoo, but that guy's got a big tattoo on his back. And I'm like, okay. So now we got a brown Asian guy with a tattoo on his back. I'm like, Cody, we can't go hit the house. He's like, man, he goes, I'm telling you, this is the guy. And I'm like, can you tell it's him for sure? He goes, I can't. I said, we need confirmation. So I called his mom, and I asked her, I'm like, can you get hold of your son? She goes, yeah. I'm like, I'm going to have to call you, and when I tell you to call, you're going to have to call right then. And she goes, okay. She goes, I can do that. So, again, night comes, guy comes out, and called the mom immediately. I'm like, I need you to call him right now. She goes, okay. So she hung up and she called him, and all of a sudden he reaches in his pocket and he pulls out a phone and he answers. And the one thing that we've got is this guy is left-handed. And I'm like, Cody, he's using his right hand. So just then, he reaches over in his other pocket and he pulls out a pen. And he puts a piece of paper on the hood of the car and he starts writing with his left hand. And I looked at Cody, he looked at me, and Cody's got this giggle. He's like, yeah, that's him. And I'm like, okay. I said, so whenever he comes out, I said, we'll take him. It wasn't an hour later, Cody's phone rang, and he had an emergency come up with his family. He had to leave. So I was like, it's okay, dude. And we left. And I mean, I left in a hurry because I had to get him back to his car so he could get home. Well, I got back to where I was staying, and I had just taken a nice shower, and my pager went off, and it was his mom calling me. And I called his mom back, and she says, KC, he just called me. She said, he's talking about leaving. He's going to go to San Francisco. She said, oh, either tomorrow evening or the next morning. So Cody was out of it, and I just happened to be visiting with Pookie. That's where I was taking a shower. Pookie'd been having some rough times at that time. He'd been going through a little bit of stuff that he didn't want to go through. And I looked at him and I said, hey, you want to go to work? And he goes, what do you mean? I was like, come work with me till tomorrow. I says, and I'll pay you $5,000. And he goes, $5,000? I'm like, yeah. He goes, hell yeah, I'll go. He goes, what do I need? I was like, grab your 45 and let's go. He goes, okay. So we hopped in Alice and we hauled ass. I mean, we were flying. We get up there and we're sitting up on this house. And it was around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. And that car was there in the driveway still. So we sat there, and it was right around 3:30 in the afternoon. He comes walking out of the house, and he gets in that car. And Pookie's like, "That's him? This is it? Right here? This is it?" I'm like, "We're not going to take him there." I was like, "No way." I said, "There's a woman in that house." I said, "We're going to have to tail him." So we set up tail, and we start following him. He leaves this immediate city. He goes across a huge bridge, and he's going into an area that's considered like an industrial area. So I called local law enforcement, and I says, "This is who I am. This is the warrant. This is the warrant number. This is the guy that I'm after." I said, "I've got authorization to arrest and detain and transport." And they're like, "Hold on a minute." They come back and they're like, "That's not a valid warrant. You need to break off immediately, otherwise you're going to be arrested." And I started laughing. I'm like, "This is a valid warrant. This man is a wanted fugitive. I need backup ASAP. We are in an industrial area where I can take him down right now where it's safe." I said, "He's known to carry submachine guns." And they're like, "You need to break off immediately. That is not a valid warrant." And I said, "You know what? Fuck you." I said, "I'm going to take him down." And I like, "Pookie, it's just you and me." He goes, "That's fine. I'm good."
How often during the work that you do you call for police backup? I think that's the first time you've said to me that you've actively called the police to come and help you.
Well, I don't. My first thought is always the preservation of safety of innocent people. When you injure somebody that's innocent, and that doesn't matter if it's a man, a woman, or a child, you got to live with that. And if you're the kind of person that doesn't have a problem living with that, then you shouldn't be doing this kind of work or any kind of work. You shouldn't be a cop. You shouldn't be a firefighter. You've got to understand that the preservation of life is a sacred thing. This goes back to that little bird, So in this instance, I was completely out of my realm. I was put into a situation and a scenario where the preservation of life to me was trying to arrest this man, and I did. I told his mom I'd try not to kill him. I did. I told her that when she first talked to me. And she told me that he would probably try to kill me. I mean, she was very clear about these things. So we're tailing this guy, trying to find a spot where he's going to stop. Well, he leaves the industrial area, and he goes down the freeway. Turns off and goes into an area that's getting very close to a residential area. It's now around 4:30 in the afternoon. Rush hour's coming. Traffic's picking up, and I'm just like, holy crap, I don't need this. So I called the cops again. And I told them, I'm like, "Look, we're coming up to a stoplight." I said, "I need backup at this area right now." And they're like, "We told you to break off. We're going to send units. You're getting arrested." And I'm like, "I'm taking him down right now." Well, what had happened is there was a huge garbage truck that pulled up into a turn lane. And he had pulled this car up right behind that garbage truck. I pulled Alice up right behind him. And I mean, I was so close to his back bumper. So to him, he's just sitting at a stoplight. He can't move. He can't get out. I go, "Now, Pookie." We just jumped out of that truck. We went running around up there. I'd left Alice in gear, so Alice bumped into the back of his car. Well, when that happens, what do? You immediately get out of your car, don't you? When Alice bumped into the back of his car, his door opened up. I grabbed him by his he had shaved head on the side and long hair on top. I grabbed him by his head and I slammed his head right into the door frame. Just bam! And I kind of addled him, and I trapped his left hand with my arm. So when I spun him around, I slammed him up against the car, and I pulled out zip ties I had in my belt loops, and I pulled his hands behind his back, and I got his hands zip tied quick. And he was fighting, but he is small. I mean, he probably weighed 140 pounds, maybe 145. He's not that big. He's only 5'6", 5'7". And Pookie had run up, and he's got his .45 pointed at the guy. And I grabbed the guy's shirt, and I just tore it straight down his back. And there on his back is this big old tattoo. And I'm like, "Well," I says, "guess what?" I says, "You're going to jail." And he just looked at me. He didn't say a word. His eyes, man, if he could have killed me dead right there, he would have. Well, we can hear sirens, and they are coming. And you got to understand, traffic backed up so fast for miles. We were at an intersection, a major intersection, 4 corners backed up, cops coming from everywhere. And I pushed the guy over, so he was laying on the ground. I zip-tied around his ankles. So I picked the guy up, and I threw him over my shoulder, and just as the first police cars are skidding into the intersection, I throw him right over the bed of my truck, into the bed of my truck. Police started pulling up, and Pookie's like, "What do I do, Casey?" And I was like, "Back up to the truck, get inside the folds of the door, keep your gun out, do not put your firearm away. Back me up no matter what happens." I said, "We are not going to jail over this shit." And the first cop that gets out, he's like, "Get your hands up." And I'm like, "No." I said, "That's not going to happen." I pulled out the paperwork and I threw it, and it hit him in the chest, fell on the ground. I said, "There's your warrant." He's like, "There's no active warrant in the system." I said, "I don't give 2 shits. Look at that fucking warrant right there." I said, "It's got a wet signature and it was signed by a judge." I says, "Pookie, keep your gun on him." And the cop looks over my shoulder, and there's Pookie in the door of the truck with his .45 trained right in that cop's face. And all these other cops are pulling up. That cop still got his gun out, pointed at me. And all these cops are pulling their guns out, and they're like, "Put your weapon down, put your weapon down." And I'm like, "If I draw my weapon," I said, "you're going to die, buddy." I said, "Verify that warrant." So he called whoever he had to call. And by then, I kid you not, there was probably 12, 15, 20 cops had showed up. Every one of them had their guns out at their cars, pointed at me at the intersection. One woman cop came up, and she starts screaming at me. And she's like, "You can't treat a human being like that." I said, "He's not a human being." I said, "Right now you guys are trying to cover your fucking ass." I said, "I called you twice for backup and you refused." I said, "Now we're in a major intersection with cars backed up 4 ways. This guy's heavily wanted and you guys are trying to save face." I said, "Get out of my damn face." Just then the sergeant rolls up, and he comes out, and he goes, "Hey, we're really sorry about this." He goes, "Let me sign this for you. It obviously wasn't entered in the system correctly." And I'm like, "Well, that's not my problem." I said, "Pookie, holster your weapon." So Pookie puts his .45 away. He takes that piece of paper, he puts it on the hood of my truck, and he signed it right there. He goes, "We'll take control of that prisoner." I said, "Put the shackles on his legs first, and I'll release his legs." So they put the shackles on his legs. I cut the ties off. He didn't even move his hands. The cops put the swivel cuffs on him right there. And then I grabbed him by his shackle chain and by his arm, and I lifted him out of the tailgate, and I handed him to 2 of the cops, and they both took him and put him over in the police car. And I said, "We're going to get going." I said, "Can we get an escort out of here?" And the sergeant looked at me, and he smiled, and he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "You can." So they put a police car in front of us with the lights on and cut us a path through all the cars, and we got to get out of there and leave. So we drove straight to the mom's house. And we got there, and I knocked on the door, and she was crying. And she goes, "You killed him, didn't you?" And I says, "No, ma'am, I did not kill your son." And she kind of looked at me, and she wiped her tears, and she was sniffling, and she goes, "You didn't kill him?" And I'm like, "No, ma'am. He is right now in the hands of the police." And she goes, "Well, how much money am I going to owe?" So we put her in Alice, and we drove down to this company, and the owner was there waiting for us. And he personally signed off on all the paperwork. I explained to her that she was only going to be out the original $50,000 fee. The bail bondsman kept bringing up the amount that it actually was, which was well over $150,000. I told him, I'm like, "It'd be a lot more than that if I'd added my fee to it." I said it would have been $250,000, right? He's like, "Well, yeah." We left there, and she had all of her paperwork that kept the lien on her house, everything. She had everything back. And we're driving back to her house, and she put her little tiny hand on my arm. And she says, "Young man, I don't have a lot of money." She said, "But I'd like to invite you to dinner." So she asked if I was married, and I broke one of my own rules. I told her yes, I was. And she says, "I want you to bring your wife." So we planned dinner a couple weeks out, and I came back with my wife, and we met the most incredible family that night. I bet you there was 30 or 40 people there. Cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents, and they had the most incredibly authentic food, and this little lady and her family had prepared the whole thing by hand. And we sat there that night, and we just ate, and it was a celebration of her getting to keep her home. we saved kind of everything for her family because it was the one thing that she had that her and her husband had bought together when they first came to the U.S. So, pretty incredible people.
That's the story of the American dream right there, I guess. Isn't it?
I guess so.
You got emotional telling me about that woman inviting you for dinner. Why?
You know, $50,000 that woman gave the bail bondsman was her children's college money. The amount of food that was bought that night, I mean, I'm sure her family chipped in and made all that what it was, but, you know, this woman was not wealthy. But to refuse her offer would have been an insult to her heritage. And to be honest, I love that kind of food anyway, so it was kind of nice. But she made these little leaf things that were rolled up. They had like banana and rice in them. They were like rolled up in banana leaves. It was like the most incredibly tasty thing. I don't even know what they're called to this day, but I would love to have them again. But for somebody to want to give that much of themselves when they have nothing to give, pretty incredible.
Whenever you talk to me, Casey, about the more violent aspects of your work, the force you find necessary to use when you're detaining somebody like the young man you've just told me about, when you describe about smashing somebody's face onto the side of a car, there's no emotion in your voice. And yet when you talk about somebody cooking you a meal, you get really emotional. Have you noticed that?
Nope. I mean, that's an old lady. Goes back to that woman thing, right?
It seems like when somebody shows you kindness, it overwhelms you.
Yeah. You might say that's something I'm unaccustomed to.
But you sometimes don't show emotion in the places where I would expect you to show that emotion. And yet that gesture of kindness floors you.
Well, then quit ambushing me, Sam, damn it. I'm sorry, Sam. I know you've heard me get a little bit owly about things, but today you actually got to see me get a little hot.
Do you know what I did? And do you know what, Casey? I know we're all complex humans, and we're not all the same thing and the same person all the time. But, my God, I think about a man leaning against a fence, bare feet in the grass, feeling the soil under his toes, feeling the sun on his face, and really at one with the natural world about him. And that is how he recharges, and that is how he fills his soul. And I have to say and remind myself, that's the same man who goes into houses of the bad guys, as you've said to me, in your opinion, the bad guys, points guns at them and strips them naked and threatens them and ties them up. And you're one man.
Yeah. Heck, everybody in America does that. Didn't you know that? That's what we do for recreation.
You always make jokes, but I'm trying to get to the heart of who you are. You bat me away with humor.
Ah, you're pretty intuitive, Sam, aren't you? I'm just a normal person, Sam. I really am. I'm just like everybody else. I'm just like you and just like your husband, just like your neighbor. I'm honestly no different. I'm just a man that loves my country, and honestly, I love the people in it. I just wish there was more people that felt the same way. Next time on American Vigilante.
You shot your first dog?
Yeah. Hardest thing I ever had to do in my life. I almost always carry a pantyhose and crazy glue.
Okay.
Yep. So the two girls that were already at the table were both Americans, and I see one of the guys slip something in one of their drinks. I almost puked when I walked in that room, Sam.
But you enjoyed taking a life?
I enjoyed exterminating an insect that was poisoning the planet.
American Vigilante is a Crowd Network original. It's presented by me, Sam Walker. It's produced by Phil Brown and Steve Jones. The executive producer for Crowd is Mike Carr. The executive producer for Stowaway Entertainment is Jeff Singer. The music we used is from our partners, BMG Production Music. If you want another Crowd podcast to listen to, try Murder in House 2. It's the extraordinary story of how a group of Marines killed 24 innocent civilians in the Haditha massacre, and how the US government tried to cover it up. It's a 10-part series that took 15 years to make. You'll be shocked, it'll definitely make you think, and it will make you question everything you thought you knew about the Iraq War. Search for Murder in House 2 in your podcast app.
Crowd Network, a place where you belong.
Come to order. This investigation is convened by Lieutenant General James T. Mattis, commanding officer.
I want to tell you a story.
May I call you first witness? Yes, sir.
Close your eyes. Explosion goes off. Boom!
We both yelled clear.
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 It's a story about a crime that shocked the world.
U.S. Marines murdered innocent civilians in cold blood.
And a cover-up that reached into the highest levels of the United States military.
5, 6, 7, possibly 7 gunshots in the door.
It is also a story I recorded in secret.
Evidence collected. Departing House 2 at 15:55 due to a tactical situation which demands our departure.
So join me, Michael Epstein, as I reveal the truth about the longest, most expensive criminal investigation in U.S. military history. Murder in House 2, a 10-part podcast series available right now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.